The coffee cup slipped from Emma Chen's trembling fingers, shattering against the sterile hospital floor with a sound that seemed to echo through her entire world. Dark liquid spread across the white tiles like spilled hope, and she stared at it, unable to move, unable to breathe. Miss Chen. Dr. Rodriguez's voice seemed to come from underwater. Did you hear what I said about Tommy's treatment options? Emma's knees buckled. She gripped the edge of the consultation desk, her knuckles white against the wood grain. The numbers swimming in her vision weren't just medical statistics. They were a death sentence wrapped in clinical terminology. $50,000, she whispered, the words scraping her throat raw. For the experimental therapy, it's his best chance, the doctor said gently. The conventional treatments aren't working fast enough. His blood counts are dropping and we need to act within the next month. Through the glass partition, Emma could see Tommy in his hospital bed. 15 years old and so thin, his bones seemed to press against his skin like bird wings. He was sketching in the notebook she'd brought him, probably drawing superheroes again. He still believed in heroes who could save the day. Emma made $38,000 a year, before taxes. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like angry wasps, and the antiseptic smell made her stomach turn. She'd been living on coffee and determination for 6 months, picking up every extra shift the hospital offered, selling everything of value she owned. Their parents' wedding rings, her grandmother's jewelry, even her textbooks from nursing school. It still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I need some time, Emma managed, though time was the one thing Tommy didn't have. She stumbled. Through the hospital corridors, past the familiar faces of colleagues who offered sympathetic smiles they thought she couldn't see, past the vending machines that had become her primary source of nutrition, past the chapel where she'd spent countless hours begging a god who seemed to have forgotten her address. The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper, and Emma caught her reflection in the polished steel, 24 years old, but her eyes held decades of exhaustion. Her scrubs hung loose on her frame, and her dark hair was pulled back in a bun that had seen better days. When had she become this hollow version of herself? Her apartment building squatted in the older part of town like a tired animal, its brick facade stained with years of neglect. The hallway smelled of cooking oil and disappointment. Emma climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their 1-bedroom unit, each step feeling like a mountain. She'd given Tommy the bedroom. She slept on a couch that had been old when they'd bought it second-hand 5 years ago. The refrigerator hummed and rattled through the night, and the heating barely worked, but it was home. It was theirs. Emma unlocked the door and found Tommy exactly where she'd left him that morning, curled up on the couch with his sketchbook, wrapped in their grandmother's quilt. But now his eyes were closed, and his breathing seemed too shallow, too quick. Fear shot through her like electricity. Tommy? She knelt beside him, pressing her palm to his forehead. Fever. But his skin felt papery and fragile. Hey, sleepyhead. Duh. His eyes fluttered open, and he smiled at her with the same sweetness that had kept her going through every impossible day since their parents died. How did the appointment go? She forced her face into a mask of calm. Dr. Rodriguez just wants to try some new medications. Nothing to worry about. Tommy studied her with eyes too wise for 15. He'd learned to read her expressions. During the long nights when she'd sat beside his bed, holding his hand through the worst of the treatments, "You're lying. I'm protecting you," she said, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "There's a difference. I'm not a little kid anymore. I know I'm getting sicker." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd spent months trying to shield him from the brutal reality of their situation, but Tommy had always been too smart for his own good. "We're going to figure this out," she said, though she had no idea how. "I promise." That night, Emma sat at their tiny kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills that seemed to multiply every time she looked away. The calculator beside her elbow mocked her with its digital display of impossible numbers. Even if she worked every available shift for the next 2 years, even if she never bought another thing for herself, never spent a penny on anything but the absolute necessities, she couldn't save $50,000 in time. She'd already applied for every grant, every charity program, every assistance fund she could find. Too many people needed help, and there wasn't enough money to go around. The knock on her door at 8 o'clock the next morning shattered the fragile quiet of their routine. Emma never had visitors, especially not at this hour. Through the peephole, she saw a woman with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Emma's monthly salary. "Miss Chen?" The woman's voice was cultured, precise. "My name is Margaret Foster. I represent someone who would like to make you an offer." Emma's first instinct was to slam the door. She'd heard about scams targeting people in financial trouble, predators who fed on desperation, but something in the woman's demeanor stopped her. "What kind of offer?" Emma asked, keeping the chain lock engaged. "The kind that could solve all your financial problems," Margaret replied. "May I come in? I promise you'll want to hear what I have to say." Against every instinct screaming at her to walk away, Emma unlocked the chain. Margaret Foster sat on Emma's worn couch like a queen holding court in a peasant's cottage. Her expensive handbag rested beside her, its leather so buttery it seemed to glow against the faded upholstery. She declined Emma's offer of coffee with a polite smile that somehow managed to convey both kindness and pity. "Miss Chen, I'm going to be direct because I believe you're someone who appreciates honesty," Margaret began, pulling out a leather portfolio. "My employer needs a wife. For love, not for companionship, but for business purposes." Emma stared at her, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The arrangement would last exactly 1 year," Margaret continued, as if Emma hadn't spoken. "After which, you would receive a substantial payment and be free to resume your life. Of your brother's medical expenses would be covered immediately, and you would receive $200,000 at the end of the contract." The number hit Emma like a slap. $200,000. Enough to cover Tommy's experimental treatment, his ongoing care, and leave them with a cushion that would ensure he never had to worry about medical bills again. "Who is this person?" Emma's voice came out as barely a whisper. "James Hawthorne. Perhaps you've heard of him." Emma's blood went cold. Everyone had heard of James Hawthorne. His face graced business magazines with the regularity of clockwork, usually accompanied by headlines about his latest technological breakthrough or billion-dollar acquisition. Dark hair, intense blue eyes, and a reputation for ruthless business. Practices that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. "Why me?" Emma asked. "There must be thousands of women who would jump at this chance." Margaret's smile was razor-thin. Mr. Hawthorne was very specific about his requirements. Someone genuine, hard-working, without complicated social connections. Someone who wouldn't confuse a business arrangement with romance. She paused, letting the words sink in. "Your background was thoroughly investigated, Miss Chen. You're exactly what he needs." The casual mention of being investigated sent a chill down Emma's spine. How much did they know about her, about Tommy, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering how she was going to keep her brother alive? "What would I have to do?" Emma asked, hating herself for even considering it. Live in his home, accompany him to social events, wear a wedding ring in public. Nothing intimate, nothing personal. Simply play the role of Mrs. James Hawthorne for 1 year. Emma's mind raced. The practical part of her saw salvation in Margaret's words. But something deeper, something that still believed in love and dignity, recoiled at the idea of selling herself like a commodity. "I need time to think about this." Margaret nodded and handed her a business card made of paper so thick it felt like fabric, of course. "But I need your answer by tomorrow evening. If you accept, the wedding would take place next Friday." After Margaret left, Emma sat alone in her living room staring at the card. The address was embossed in gold, and even the paper smelled expensive. Tommy emerged from the bedroom, rubbing his eyes and looking even paler than usual. "Who was?" "That Lady M? Someone offering us a chance at a better life," Emma replied, pulling her brother close and breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. "But I'm not sure what the cost might be." That afternoon at the hospital, Emma watched the 4 drips slowly empty into Tommy's arm. Each bag of medication cost more than she made in a week. And Dr. Rodriguez had been increasingly concerned about Tommy's response to the current treatment. "The experimental therapy I mentioned," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, pulling Emma aside. It's showing remarkable results in clinical trials. I really think it could give Tommy a chance at a normal life. How much time do we have to decide? Emma asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. 2 weeks? Maybe 3? After that, his condition might be too advanced for the treatment to be effective. 2 weeks. Emma stared at her brother's sleeping form, at the dark circles under his eyes and the way his hospital gown hung loose on his shrinking frame. 2 weeks to find $50,000, or watch him slip away from her forever. That evening, Emma sat beside Tommy's bed as he worked on a new sketch. This one was different from his usual superheroes. It showed a girl with dark hair standing in front of a huge, imposing building, dwarfed by its size but not bowed by it. Is that supposed to be me? Emma asked. Tommy nodded. You're always taking care of everyone else? I thought maybe you could be the superhero for once. Emma's throat tightened. If only he knew how powerless she really felt. She waited until Tommy fell asleep before calling the number on Margaret's card. I accept, she said when Margaret answered. Wonderful. I'll send a car for you tomorrow morning. Mr. Hawthorne would like to discuss the details with you personally. After hanging up, Emma stared at her reflection in the darkened window. The girl looking back at her seemed like a stranger, someone capable of making impossible choices. Someone willing to sacrifice her own dreams for the people she loved. The Hawthorne Technologies building dominated the downtown skyline like a glass and steel monument to ambition. Emma's reflection multiplied endlessly in the polished surfaces. As she rode the private elevator to the top floor, her hands shook despite her efforts to stay calm. James Hawthorne's office occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city spread out below like a glittering circuit board. Emma felt like she was standing on top of the world, and the sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying.
Ow.
James himself stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the window. He was taller than his photographs suggested, with dark hair that showed just a touch of silver at the temples. When he turned around, his blue eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Miss Chen, he said, his voice deep and carefully controlled. Thank you for coming. His handshake was firm but brief, and Emma noticed how quickly he stepped back afterward. Maintaining a careful distance between them, there was something almost defensive in his posture, as if he were protecting himself from her. Mr. Hawthorne. Emma replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I have to admit, this whole situation feels surreal. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, transforming his features for just a moment before disappearing again. Imagine it does. Please, sit down. I'd like to explain exactly what this arrangement would entail. For the next hour, James laid out the terms of their agreement with the precision of a corporate contract. Emma would live in his estate outside the city, in her own private suite. They would appear together at social events approximately once a month. She would wear a wedding ring in public and play the role of his devoted wife. What about physical affection? Emma asked, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. I mean, if we're supposed to be married, won't people expect to see some kind of connection between us? We'll maintain appropriate appearances in public, James said, his tone carefully neutral. Hand-holding when necessary. Standing close together for photographs. Nothing more intimate than what any casual observer would expect from a married couple. Emma nodded, surprised by the wave of disappointment that washed over her. What had she expected? This was a business transaction, nothing more. And after a year, we'll divorce quietly. You'll receive your payment, and we'll both be free to resume our separate lives. That night, Emma lay on her couch listening to Tommy's steady breathing from the bedroom. In less than a week, she would become Mrs. James Hawthorne, trading her name and her freedom for her brother's life. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time in months, she felt something that had become almost foreign to her. Hope. The Hawthorne estate materialized from the morning mist like something from a fever dream. Emma pressed her face to the limousine window, watching as iron gates parted to reveal a sprawling mansion that seemed to stretch endlessly across manicured grounds. Ancient oak trees lined the drive, their branches forming a canopy overhead that filtered the sunlight into dancing patterns of gold and green. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that Margaret had provided, along with shoes that cost more than Emma's monthly rent. The wedding ring on her finger felt foreign and heavy, a constant reminder of the bargain she'd made with her own soul. The ceremony itself had been sterile and efficient. Conducted in a judge's chambers with Margaret and James's attorney as witnesses, Emma had spoken her vows to a man who looked at her like she was a business acquisition, his blue eyes giving nothing away. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, James had kissed her cheek with all the warmth of a handshake. Now, as the limousine pulled up to the front entrance, Emma felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to. This wasn't just a house. It was a fortress, beautiful and imposing, and completely separate from the world she knew. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hawthorne," the driver said, and the title sounded like a lie on his lips. James was waiting for her in the marble foyer, his hands clasped behind his back. He'd changed from his wedding suit into dark jeans and a white button-down shirt that somehow made him look both more approachable and more dangerous. "I'll show you to your rooms," he said without preamble. "Dinner is served at 7 if you'd like to join me. If not, the kitchen staff can prepare something for you at any time." Emma followed him up a grand staircase that curved like a question mark, her heels clicking against the marble steps. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to track her movement with disapproval. "You're sweet," James said, opening a set of double doors with an almost ceremonial gesture. Emma stepped into a space larger than her entire apartment. The sitting room was decorated in soft blues and creams, with French doors that opened onto a private balcony overlooking the gardens. Through an archway, she could see a bedroom with a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a castle. "The bathroom is through there," James said, pointing to another door. "There's a walk-in closet Margaret took the liberty of having. It's stocked with appropriate clothing in your size." Emma wandered to the French doors, looking out at grounds that seemed to stretch to the horizon. A gardener was trimming roses in the distance, his movements methodical and precise. Everything here was perfect, controlled, beautiful, and it felt like a prison. "James," she said, turning back to find him still standing in the doorway. I ask you something?" The shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "What is it? Why are you doing this?" "The marriage, I mean. You could have anyone you wanted. Why pay someone to pretend to love you?" For a moment, something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or anger. Then his expression smoothed into its usual mask of polite indifference. "Love is a luxury I can't afford," he said. "This arrangement serves my purposes without the complications of genuine emotion." "What purposes?" "Are certain business deals, certain social circles, where being married provides advantages. My board of directors has been pressuring me to settle down, project stability." This solves several problems efficiently." Emma stared at him, trying to read the emotions he kept locked behind his carefully controlled expression. "That's the most cynical thing I've ever heard." "It's practical," James replied. "I'll leave you to get settled." He turned to go, then paused at the threshold. Without looking back, he said, "Emma, I know this isn't what you dreamed of when you thought about marriage. I'm sorry for that." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Emma alone in her beautiful cage. That first night, Emma sat at a dining table that could have seated 20, picking at food prepared by a chef she hadn't even met. James sat at the opposite end, the distance between them filled with crystal glasses and bone china and the weight of their mutual discomfort. "How is your brother doing?" James asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for most of the meal. Emma looked up, surprised. "Better, actually. The new treatment started yesterday. Dr. Rodriguez says it's too early to tell. Tommy seems to have more energy already." "I'm glad," James said, and something in his voice made her believe he meant it. "You have excellent taste in wine," Emma said, gesturing to her glass. "I don't drink," James replied, "but I'm told the cellar is well stocked." Emma studied his face. "Why don't you drink? Personal choice." Another wall, another deflection. Emma was beginning to understand that James Hawthorne was a man built entirely of barriers, each one carefully constructed to keep the world at a safe distance. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Emma spent her mornings visiting Tommy at the hospital, watching his colors slowly return as the experimental treatment worked its magic. In the afternoons, she wandered the estate grounds, exploring gardens that seemed to have been designed by someone who understood the language of flowers. James was like a ghost in his own home. She'd catch glimpses of him heading to his study in the mornings, or returning from the office late at night. They ate dinner together in silence, two strangers sharing a meal and nothing else. It was during her second week in the house that Emma discovered James's secret. She'd been unable to sleep, restless in her luxurious bedroom, when she heard music drifting through the halls. She followed the sound to a room she hadn't explored yet, pushing open the door to find James sitting at a grand piano, his fingers moving across the keys with surprising grace. The melody was haunting and beautiful, filled with a sadness that seemed to echo from the depths of his soul. Emma recognized it as Chopin, one of the nocturnes her mother used to play when Emma was small. James's eyes were closed as he played, his face unguarded for once. In the soft glow of the piano lamp, he looked younger, more vulnerable. Human Emma must have made a sound, because his hands stilled on the keys and his eyes opened, finding hers across the room. "I'm sorry," Emma said quickly. "I heard the music and it's fine," James said, but his hands had already moved away from the keys. "I couldn't sleep. It was beautiful. I didn't know you played. It's not something I advertise." He stood, and Emma could see him rebuilding his walls in real time. "You should get some rest. We have that charity gala tomorrow night." Emma had forgotten about the gala, their first public appearance as husband and wife. The thought filled her with dread. "James, wait," she said as he moved toward the door. "That song you were playing? It reminded me of something my mother used to play." He paused, his hand on the doorframe. "Your mother was a pianist? She taught piano lessons to help pay the bills. She died when I was 19. For a moment, James's mask slipped again. "I'm sorry for your loss. What about your parents?" Emma asked, sensing an opening in his defenses. But the walls slammed back into place immediately. "Good night, Emma." Why, she watched him disappear into the shadows of the hallway, leaving her alone with the silent piano and the lingering echo of his music. The next morning, Emma found a cup of coffee waiting for her in the kitchen, still steaming, alongside a note written in James's precise handwriting. "Thank you for listening. Jay." It was such a small gesture, but it felt like the first crack in the fortress he'd built around himself. Emma found herself smiling as she sipped the perfectly prepared coffee, wondering what other secrets James Hawthorne was hiding behind his walls of ice. The charity gala transformed Emma into someone she didn't recognize. The midnight blue gown Margaret had selected fit her like liquid silk, and the jewelry she wore probably cost more than most people's houses. Standing beside James in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, she felt like an actress playing a role she'd never auditioned for. "Smile," James murmured in her ear, his hand settling on the small of her back as photographers approached. "We're madly in love, remember?" The touch sent an unexpected shiver through her, but Emma managed to arrange her features into what she hoped looked like adoration rather than panic. James pulled her closer, and she caught a whiff of his cologne, something expensive and woodsy. That made her want to lean into him. "Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne," a reporter called out. "How does it feel to be married to one of the most eligible bachelors in the city?" "Former bachelor," Emma corrected with a laugh that sounded more natural than she'd expected. "And I'd say I'm the lucky one." "James is extraordinary." She felt James tense slightly beside her, but when she looked up at him, his smile never wavered. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple completely besotted with each other. The evening passed in a blur of champagne and careful conversation. Emma found herself genuinely enjoying parts of it, particularly when James forgot to maintain his distance and let his hand linger on her waist, or when he laughed at something she said, and his whole face transformed. It was during the auction portion of the evening that everything changed. "Our next item," the auctioneer announced, "is a week at a private villa in Tuscany, donated by the Rossini family." Emma watched the bidding start, thinking about how a week in Italy would cost more than she used to make in 6 months. The price climbed steadily, and she was about to turn away when she heard James's voice. $50,000. The room went quiet, The previous high bid had been $25,000. James, Emma whispered, "What are you doing?" Going, the auctioneer called. 100,000, came a voice from across the room. Emma turned to see a silver-haired man in an expensive tuxedo raising his paddle with a smug smile. 150,000, James said without hesitation. Emma stared at him. This wasn't about charity anymore. This was personal. 200,000, the other man called. 300,000. James's voice was deadly calm. The room buzzed with excitement. Emma could feel hundreds of eyes on them, and she realized that everyone here knew something she didn't. The tension between the two men was palpable. Sold to Mr. Hawthorne for $300,000, the auctioneer announced to thunderous applause. As they sat back down, Emma leaned close to James. "Who was that man?" Richard Blackwood, James said, his jaw tight. "My former business partner? Former? He tried to steal my company 6 years ago. Used information he gathered during our partnership to undercut a major deal. It's cost me $50 million and nearly destroyed everything I'd built." Emma studied James's profile, seeing something new in the hard line of his mouth. "Is that why you don't trust anyone? Why you bought yourself a wife instead of risking a real relationship?" James turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw, past all his carefully constructed defenses, to the wounded man beneath. "People always have an agenda, Emma. Always. It's safer to make the terms clear from the beginning." "Not everyone is." "Richard Blackwood," Emma said softly. "No," James agreed. "But how do you tell the difference until it's too late?" The rest of the evening took on a different tone. Emma found herself watching James more carefully, seeing the way he calculated. Every interaction, every smile, every handshake. He was exhausted from the constant vigilance, she realized. Tired of always expecting betrayal. When they finally returned to the estate, Emma was surprised when James didn't immediately disappear to his study. "Would you like a drink?" he asked, leading her to the library instead. "I know I said I don't drink, but I keep a well-stocked bar for guests." Emma settled into one of the leather chairs by the fireplace. "Why don't you drink?" James poured himself a glass of water and Emma a small brandy before sitting across from her. "My father was an alcoholic," he said without preamble. "Functional, highly successful, but an alcoholic nonetheless. He taught me that alcohol makes you careless. Careless with your words, your actions, your business. What happened to him? Heart attack when I was 26. Mother followed 2 years later. Cancer." James's voice was matter of fact, but Emma caught the slight tremor in his hands as he set down his glass. "I'm sorry," Emma said. "It must have been horrible, losing both of them so young." It was a long time ago. But Emma was beginning to understand that for James, nothing was ever really a long time ago. He carried every wound, every betrayal, every loss, like stones in his pockets, weighing him down. "Is that when you started building walls?" she asked. Gently, James looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean the way you keep everyone at arm's length. The way you turn every relationship into a transaction." Emma leaned forward. "James, when was the last time you let someone really know you?" "I'm letting you know me now," he said. "No, you're giving me carefully curated pieces of information. There's a difference." James stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the moonlit gardens. "You think you understand me after 3 weeks of marriage?" "I think I understand loneliness," Emma said quietly. "I've been living with it for 5 years, ever since my parents died, and I became responsible for Tommy. But at least I've been fighting it. You've been cultivating it like a garden." "Loneliness is safe," James said without turning around. "Is death," Emma replied. "But that doesn't make it living." He turned then, and the expression on his face was raw, unguarded. "What do you want from me, Emma?" "I want you to stop treating me like a business expense," she said, standing to face him. "I want you to stop disappearing every time we have a real conversation. I want you to look at me like I'm a person instead of a problem to be managed." "And what happens when you decide you want more than I can give?" James asked, his voice rough. "What happens when this arrangement isn't enough anymore?" Emma moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. "What happens if you never try to find out?" For a moment they stood there, the space between them charged with possibility. Emma could see the war playing out across James's features, his need for connection battling his fear of betrayal. Then his phone buzzed with an incoming message, shattering the moment. James glanced at it, and his expression shifted back to business mode. "I have an early meeting tomorrow," he said, the walls slamming back into place. "We should get some rest." But as Emma headed toward the door, she heard James's voice behind her, so quiet she almost missed it. "Emma, thank you. For tonight, I mean. For standing beside me during the auction." She turned back to find him still standing by the window, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "That's what wives do," she said softly. "Even the fake ones." As Emma climbed the stairs to her room, she realized something had fundamentally shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained was beginning to collapse, replaced by something more dangerous and infinitely more real. In her bathroom, she found another cup of coffee waiting for her on the vanity, still warm, with another note. "Trying," Emma smiled, holding the note against her chest. James Hawthorne might be the most complicated man she'd ever met, but for the first time since this whole arrangement began, she was starting to believe there might be something worth fighting for underneath all that armor. Something that looked suspiciously like love. Emma woke to find James standing in her bedroom doorway, fully dressed in a dark suit despite the early hour. His face was pale, and there was something in his expression that made her sit up immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked, pulling the silk robe around her shoulders. "There's been a leak," James said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Someone sold our story to the press. The real story." Emma's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" James held out his phone, and Emma's heart sank as she read the headline blazing across the screen. Blah. "Billionaires bought bride, the contract marriage that shocked Silicon Valley." The article detailed everything. The medical bills, Tommy's condition, the $200,000 payment, even quotes from anonymous hospital staff members who'd witnessed Emma's desperation. Her most private moments of fear and vulnerability were laid bare for the world's entertainment. "How did they find out?" Emma whispered. "That's what I intend to discover," James said grimly. "But right now, we need to discuss damage control. My legal team is already working on options." Emma stared at the phone screen, watching as her life imploded in real time. The comment section was brutal, calling her everything from a gold digger to a prostitute. Tommy's face appeared in several of the photos. His private medical information somehow obtained and published for everyone to see. "Oh God," Emma breathed. "Tommy, he's going to see this. Everyone at school will know." "Emma." James's voice was gentler now. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to his face, expecting to see anger or disappointment. Instead, she found something that looked almost like admiration. "We'll handle this together," he said. "But I need to know if you have any idea who might have access to this information." Mind raced through the possibilities. Hospital staff, the lawyer who'd handled the contract, Margaret, even some of her former colleagues who might have pieced things together. "It could be anyone," she said helplessly. "James, I'm so sorry. This is going to destroy you." "No," James said firmly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "It's not. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Emma nodded, bracing herself. "Do you want out?" he asked quietly. "The contract has a clause that allows either party to terminate early if the arrangement becomes public. You could walk away today with your full payment free and clear." The offer hung between them like a lifeline, and Emma realized that 3 weeks ago, she would have grabbed it without hesitation. Now, looking into James's carefully controlled expression, she understood that he was giving her an escape route he desperately hoped she wouldn't take. "Is that what you want?" Emma asked, instead of answering. "For me to leave?" James was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "What I want," he said finally, "isn't part of our agreement." "Forget the agreement," Emma said, moving closer to him on the bed. "What do you want, James?" He looked at her then with an expression so raw it took her breath away. "I want you to stay," he whispered. "Not because of the contract, not because of the money. It's because somewhere in the last 3 weeks I've started to care about you in ways that terrify me." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "James, I know it's not what we agreed to," he said quickly. "I know this complicates everything. But Emma, you've made me remember what it feels like to have someone care whether I come home at night. You've made me want things I thought I'd given up on forever." Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. Tommy's ringtone. She answered immediately, putting it on speaker. Tommy's voice was small and scared. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" Emma's throat closed up. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Are the nurses treating you well?" "I'm okay. The treatment is working really well, actually. Dr. Rodriguez says I might get to go home next week." Tommy paused. I need to tell you something."
Oh.
"Is it? I knew," Tommy said quietly. "About the arrangement, I mean. I figured it out weeks ago. You think I don't pay attention? But I do. You disappeared for a whole day, then suddenly all my medical bills were paid and you were living in a mansion. I'm not stupid." Emma felt tears burning her eyes. "Tommy, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way." "Not sorry," Tommy said firmly. You gave up everything for me. Your dreams, your life, even your chance at real love. The least I could do was pretend not to notice." James was staring at the phone with an expression Emma couldn't read. "But here's the thing," Tommy continued. "I've been watching the news all morning, and there are pictures of you and James together. Real pictures, not just the posed ones. And the way he looks at you, that's not fake. That's not part of any contract." Emma looked at James, seeing her own confusion and hope reflected in his eyes. "What are you saying, Tommy?" I'm saying, maybe you found something real in all this fake stuff. And if you did, don't let some stupid news story ruin it." Finally, James spoke. "He's a remarkable kid," he said. "Gets that from our parents," Emma replied. "They were the kind of people who always saw the best in everyone, even when there wasn't much good to see." "Like you do," James said softly. Emma turned to face him fully. "James, what are we doing here? I mean, really doing?" He admitted. 3 weeks ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I could keep this simple, transactional. But you've turned my whole world upside down," Emma said, surprising them both. "Your world needed turning upside down. You were dying in that perfectly controlled life of yours."
James!
Laughed, a real laugh that transformed his entire face. "You realize this means everything changes, right? If we do this, if we try to make this real, there's no going back to the way things were." "Do you want to go back?" Emma asked. "No," James said without hesitation. "God, no. Emma, I'm terrified of this, of you, of the way you make me feel, but I'm more terrified of letting you walk away." Emma reached for his hands, lacing their fingers. "Together, then don't let me." James pulled her closer until there was no space left between them. "I love you," he said against her forehead. "I know it's crazy and fast and completely against the terms of our contract, but I love you." "I love you too," Emma whispered back. "And you're right, it is crazy. But maybe crazy is exactly what we both needed." When James kissed her, it was nothing like the careful performed kisses they'd shared in public. This was desperate and tender, and real, full of all the emotions they'd been holding back for weeks. They were interrupted by another phone call. "It's time from Margaret." "I've been fielding calls all morning," Margaret said without preamble. "The press wants statements, interviews, photo shoots. The whole circus. What do you recommend?" James asked, though his arms never left Emma's waist. "Face it head on," Margaret said. "Hold a press conference. Control the narrative, instead of letting it control you." Emma felt James tense. "Margaret, I don't think actually," Emma interrupted. "I think she's right. Let's tell them the truth." "All of it?" James asked. "All of it," Emma confirmed. "The contract, the reasons behind it, and what happened after. Let's show them that sometimes the most unexpected arrangements can lead to something beautiful." 2 hours later, Emma stood beside James on the steps of Hawthorne Technologies, facing a sea of reporters and cameras. She wore a simple blue dress and the wedding ring that no longer felt foreign on her finger. 3 weeks ago, James began, his voice clear and strong. "I entered into a business arrangement with Emma Chen. I needed a wife for professional reasons, and she needed financial help for her brother's medical treatment. It was a contract, nothing more. Emma stepped closer to the microphone. But somewhere between the charity galas and the quiet dinners and the cups of coffee left on my bathroom counter every morning, something unexpected happened. We fell in love, James said, looking at Emma instead of the cameras. Real love. The kind that changes everything. Our marriage may have started as a business deal, Emma continued. But it's become the most real thing in both our lives. The questions came fast and sharp, but Emma and James answered them together, their hands intertwined, their voices steady. They talked about Tommy's recovery, about the experimental treatment that was giving him his life back. They talked about loneliness and trust and the courage it takes to open your heart to someone when it was over. When the last reporter had left and the cameras had been packed away, Emma and James stood alone on the steps of his building. So James said, "What happens now?" Emma smiled, rising up on her toes to kiss him properly. "Now we go home and figure out how to be married for real." "I don't know how to do that," James admitted. "I've never been in love before." "For you," Emma said. "Neither have I. We can learn together." 6 months later, Emma woke up in their bed, not her room or his room, but their room, to the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. She found James at the stove, making eggs Benedict with the concentration of a scientist. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, looking up with the smile that still made her heart skip. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne," she replied, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. On the counter sat 2 steaming mugs of coffee and a note, written in James's precise handwriting. "Good morning, beautiful. Thank you for choosing to stay. All my love, Jay." Emma smiled, thinking about how far they'd come from that first desperate bargain. Tommy was in remission now, back in school and dreaming of becoming a doctor himself. The experimental treatment had worked beyond anyone's wildest hopes, giving him not just his health back, but a future full of possibilities. And Emma had found something she'd never even known she was looking for. A love story that had started with the most unromantic proposal in history and blossomed into something that made her believe in happy endings again. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, turning in her arms. "Coffee cups," Emma said, "and how the smallest gestures can change everything." James laughed, the sound rich and warm and completely unguarded. "I love you, Emma Chen Hawthorne." "Love you too," she replied, contract and all. It's out their window. The sun was rising over the estate grounds, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. And in the kitchen of their home, a billionaire and his contract wife, who'd become his real wife, shared coffee and dreams and the kind of love that proved. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. The end asterisk like this. Video, if the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales. And share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.